First things first, I want to talk Ole Miss, Oklahoma. Ole Miss beats Oklahoma 34-26. Lane Kiffin gets his first ranked SEC road win. And again, I was shocked to hear that. I'll start by saying this Ole Miss team is a good football team. The big question mark was, would their defense be capable enough of getting stops for their offense to go and win the game? And yes, they did. They did exactly that. We'll talk some numbers real quick about this game. So for Trinidad Chambliss, quarterback for Ole Miss, 24 of 44, 315 through the air and a touchdown, no interceptions. He also had 53 yards on the ground. Kawan Lacey for Ole Miss, running back, 27 carries, 78 yards. Not a great production day on the ground. I thought Lacey had some good runs in this game, but he also tacked on 2 touchdowns. A couple of receiving stats. Winston Watkins, 4 catches for 11 yards. 4 catches for 111 yards. Harrison Wallace III, 5 catches for 64 yards. Caden Lee, 3 catches for 60. The 1 reception for a touchdown was Trace Bruckler. He had 1 catch for 8 yards, being that touchdown. The offense was clicking for Ole Miss. They did at times, they did a very good job when they were moving and on schedule. They're one of the scariest offenses in the country, playing against an Oklahoma defense that, by Brent Venables' own admission, they had not been tested yet. He said that, and I thought it was an interesting point whenever you looked at the teams that they had played. I think this Oklahoma defense is legit. Just going to start with that. But when you look at the teams that they ended up playing before this game, they haven't played anybody that had a top 30 offense. And LSU this year is number 9 in national offense. So this was their first real test, and it showed they weren't as salty, they weren't as seasoned as they could have been, and they ended up losing this game because of that. For Oklahoma, a couple stats. John Mateer, 17 for 31, 223 at 1 touchdown, no interceptions. For rushing, Xavier Robinson, 9 carries for 109 yards. He had a good day on the ground. John Mateer also ran for 17 yards, some receiving. For Oklahoma, Deion Burks, 4 catches, 32 yards. Isaiah, I struggled with the same name last week, so I'm just going to say it's Isaiah the third. 6 receptions for 131 yards and a touchdown. Jaron Kanak, 3 catches for 30 yards. It was, and also Isaiah the third had 1 fumble in that game that ended up being lost. Here's what I brought out of that game. I think with this game, the questions coming into it were going to be, can their defense get enough stops to let the offense win the game? Their defense is never going to win a football game outright for them. If it's a low-scoring defensive battle, I don't see that defense winning football games for them. What I do see is a defense that can be aggressive enough and make enough stops that the offense can go win you that football game. And this week they did that. Last week they couldn't do it against Georgia. This week they did. They got just enough stops, so they got it done. When their offense is clicking, it's one of the best in the country. It's scary to play against when you have a defense like Oklahoma who has elite personnel. Again, they haven't been tested necessarily, but they do have elite personnel and a great head coach, a very defensive-minded head coach. Whenever I talk about a Brent Venables team, one thing I know they're going to have is a solid defense, and they were picked apart by this Ole Miss offense. Now, did Ole Miss do everything right? No. I'll be honest, I thought Lane Kiffin made some poor decisions in this game that could have really hurt them. They brought in backup quarterback Austin Simmons a couple times in short yardage situations inside the 5 or inside the 10. He missed a wide open guy. There was just a couple of packages they drew up for him that I just didn't quite understand where Lane Kiffin was coming from. Maybe they saw something in practice. Maybe they saw something in tape, but there were some poor decisions made on that front. He also went for it on a 4th down in their own territory, which I thought was a poor decision at the time. You were leading by a couple of scores, and the only way the other team gets back in the game is if you give them favorable field position. They go down and score. And again, the defense did enough to win that game for them, but I thought there was a couple times in this game where Ole Miss didn't win the coaching battle necessarily. Excuse me. A couple of the things I would say, and maybe to add on to that, maybe Lane Kiffin, we talked about it, him thinking about the Florida job and it being a real part of the rumor mill this week. Maybe he's not 100% focused on Ole Miss. I think knowing from what I've seen of Lane Kiffin, I don't think that would distract him necessarily, but maybe he wasn't all there. Maybe he wasn't 100% focused on this game. But there were some decisions in there I thought he made that just didn't make a lot of sense. But they end up winning the game. He gets his first road win against Oklahoma, a good Oklahoma team. For this Oklahoma team, I don't think they're healthy. John Mateer especially. And you'll hear people say nobody's 100% at this point in the season, which is completely true. Whenever you have a quarterback who has had a hand injury, his throwing hand specifically, had to have surgery on it, came back, I thought too early against Texas, did not play a good game there. They go out, they get a comfortable win against South Carolina, but there were still problems in that game. Watching it back for Oklahoma, they still had struggles. And then they come into this game, now they find their second loss in 3 weeks. I don't know where you go from here if you're Oklahoma. You got a tough test coming up in a couple weeks at Alabama. I think that offensive line is very susceptible. We've talked about it before with this Ole Miss defense. They're not the greatest. They do play aggressively. Pete Golding likes to play an aggressive defense. It's kind of an all or nothing defense, where either you're picking up negative plays and you're going to set them back and stop a drive, or you're going to give up some big plays on the back end. And they won. That defense beat that offensive line time and time again on the inside. Mateer was running for his life a lot of this game, and it forced a couple of mistakes. So I think if you're Oklahoma and you look now and 3 weeks ago when you were taking on Texas and you say, well, we're favored in this game. We can go out. Well, actually, they weren't favored. I apologize. We believe we can win this game. We're going in here. Yeah, our quarterback's not 100%, but we're playing against a Texas team who hasn't clicked all year. We can come into this game, and once we get past this, we look at, we have a couple tough games down the road, but now you look up, you lost that Texas game, you beat South Carolina, fair enough, and then you go and you struggle and you lose against Ole Miss. You look up now and the margin for error is razor thin. I'm not saying they can't make the playoffs, but I think it's a very thin margin for error now with Oklahoma. And going forward, it's not going to get much easier. Like I said, they have Bama coming up in a couple of weeks. They play, they end up playing, they have Tennessee, Alabama, Mizzou, and then LSU to wrap up the season. So you're going into a tough stretch in this year where Tennessee's got a great offense. Bama's a tough team just all around. Mizzou, they lost their quarterback, but they can play a gritty game. And then you have LSU, who's in a little bit of a disarray. But it's not an easy stretch by any means for an Oklahoma team that I thought peaked very early, and I thought they could keep on going in the ascendancy. But now we're seeing a real plateau and a bit of a fall off now in that team. For Ole Miss, it's a pretty favorable run, if I'm being honest. You're one loss. You suffered one loss to Georgia in SEC play, so that does hurt. But you look forward, you have South Carolina, you have the Citadel, you have Florida, and then you play the Egg Bowl against Mississippi State. Pretty favorable run if you're Lane Kiffin looking forward at this game. I think that at this last stretch of games, you look at your team and you say, we lost a gritty one to Georgia. We toughed this one out against Oklahoma. We've won a couple of games that maybe we wouldn't in the past. And now it might be time for us to get over the hump. We'll see. The Egg Bowl is always interesting. There are teams in there that can pop. South Carolina's one that can pop. So you never know. But for Ole Miss and for Lane Kiffin, I think they're in a really good spot. The real question for Ole Miss is, and the one thing that the fans and everybody around that program is going to be talking about is, will we have a head coach next season? And you will have a head coach next season, but will his name be Lane Kiffin? That's going to be the real cloud over this program for the time being until he denies the job or until Florida finds an official appointment for head coach.